हेलो फ्रेंड्स, वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। तो आज हम लोग शुरू करने वाले हैं। हम लोग ने इससे पहले देखा रीजनल रूरल बैंक्स और इमरजेंस ऑफ एसबीआई और बहुत सारी चीज़ें। आज हम लोग देखने वाले हैं कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स। ठीक है, तो चलिए शुरू करते हैं। बैंक इन इंडिया कैन बी ब्रॉडली क्लासिफाइड अंडर टू हेड्स, कमर्शियल बैंक्स एंड कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स। जनरली इंडिया में बैंकों को दो तरह से डिवाइड किया जा सकता है। ठीक है, पहली जिसमें आती है हमारी कमर्शियल बैंक्स एंड दूसरी आती है कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स। वाइल कमर्शियल बैंक्स, नेशनलाइज्ड बैंक्स, स्टेट बैंक ग्रुप्स, प्राइवेट सेक्टर बैंक्स, फॉरेन बैंक्स एंड आरआरबी, ये कमर्शियल बैंक्स होती हैं। ठीक है, अकाउंट फॉर एन ओवरवेलमिंग शेयर ऑफ द बैंकिंग बिजनेस। Cooperative banks also play an important role. Initially set up to supplant indigenous source of rural credit, particularly money lender. Today they mostly serve the needs of agriculture and allied activities. That is called a cooperative bank. अब आप लोग समझ गए होंगे इनको कोऑपरेटिव क्यों कहते हैं। कोऑपरेट, समझ गए। रूरल बेस्ड इंडस्ट्रीज टू लेसर एक्सटेंट ट्रेड एंड इंडस्ट्री इन अर्बन सेंटर। कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स हैव अ 3 tier स्ट्रक्चर। पहला प्राइमरी क्रेडिट सोसाइटीज़, पहला है प्राइमरी क्रेडिट सोसाइटी जिसको हम पीसीएसएस एग्रीकल्चर और अर्बन में जो काम करती है। दूसरी है डिस्ट्रिक्ट सेंट्रल कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स, डीसीसीबी जिसको हम कहते हैं। तीसरी है स्टेट कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स जिसको हम एससीबीज कहते हैं, एट द अपेक्स लेवल। ठीक है, सबसे ऊपर स्टेट में। तो लेट्स टॉक अबाउट द यूसीबी, प्राइमरी क्रेडिट सोसाइटी। तो अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स में सबसे पहले आती है प्राइवेट क्रेडिट सोसाइटीज। In urban areas that meet certain specified criteria can apply to the RBI. Apply में RBI कर सकते हैं for a banking license to operate as urban कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स। जो प्राइमरी क्रेडिट सोसाइटीज़ हैं वो एक निश्चित क्राइटेरिया पर पहुंचने के बाद आरबीआई में अप्लाई कर सकते हैं एज ए कोऑपरेटिव बैंक ऑपरेट करने के लिए। ठीक है, दे आर रजिस्टर्ड एंड governed under the Cooperative Societies Act of respective state and are covered by the Banking Regulation Act 1949। और उसी स्टेट के रेस्पेक्टिव कोऑपरेटिव जो एक्ट होता है उसके उससे और आरबीआई बैंकिंग रेगुलेशन के एक्ट 1949 के से थ्रू ये काम करते हैं। 10 आर अंडर डुअल रेगुलेटरी कंट्रोल। पहला तो ये स्टेट के रिस्पेक्टिव एक्ट के अंडर काम करते हैं, दूसरा है बैंकिंग रेगुलेशन आरबीआई के एक्ट 1949। तो डुअल इनके ऊपर क्या हो गया, रेगुलेटरी कंट्रोल हो गया। द मैनेजरियल एस्पेक्ट ऑफ दीज बैंक्स, रजिस्ट्रेशन, मैनेजमेंट, एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, रिक्रूटमेंट, एमलगमेशन एंड liquidation controlled by the state government, while the matters related to banking are regulated by the RBI. Traditionally, the area of operation of the urban cooperative banks is confined to metropolitan, urban or semi-urban centers and caters to needs of small borrower including MSME, retail trader, small entrepreneurs, professional and salaried class. However, there is no formal restriction as such today of urban cooperative banks can are registered including rural areas. Well managed primary USBs with deposit over 50 crore are also allowed to operate in more than one state subject to certain norms, as they are covered by RBI Act 1934 second schedule. They have certain rights and obligation, rights of obtaining refinance and loans from the RBI, and obligations such as maintenance of cash reserve, submission of return to the RBI, etc. Presently, there are 29 urban cooperative banks लेट्स टॉक अबाउट द DCCBs and SCBs, जो कि मैंने पहले बताया। DCCB स्टैंड फॉर डिस्ट्रिक्ट सेंट्रल कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स एंड SCB स्टैंड फॉर स्टेट कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स। As their name suggests, they operate at the district and the state level. One district can have no more than one DCCB with a number of DCBs reporting to the SCBs. They were under supervision of RBI. Later on, this function was delegated to the NABARD. NABARD replaced the RBI in matter of the DCB and SCBs. Okay. Problem of these banks. Cooperative banks play a very vital role in India's financial system, but they have also been faced with certain long-drawn problems. They are briefly discussed below. पहला क्या प्रॉब्लम है? Regulation remains the biggest issue as they are under the dual regulatory control. The urban cooperative banks come under the RBI and the registrar cooperative societies of the respective state, while the district central cooperative banks and state cooperative banks come under the NABARD, the RBI, and the registrar cooperative society. Given the close link between the politician and cooperative, and the fact that Star Cooperative Society functions under the state government. In practice, this dual or triple custody of cooperative banks has, in practice, lead to poor supervision and control. Besides, most cooperative banks are lacking in skill expertise. Recruitments are politicized, as are appointment at most levels. Income recognition and prudential norms that were introduced for commercial banks in early 1990s under the process of banking reforms are still to be done in this sector. Cooperative banks. Cooperative banks have been in the news mostly for fraudulent deals due to multiplicity of regulatory control of the federal nature. It becomes really difficult to comply these banks to the prudential norms. Meanwhile, the government of India decided in Union Budget 2017-18 to bring the cooperative banks into the ambit of core banking structure. Under the core banking solution, customers are able to avail banks services across all the branches rather than branches where the account is, making them customer bank rather than a branch. Let's talk about the regulatory changes. In 2021, the government took an effective step by amending the Banking Regulation Act 1949 in this direction, which the RBI was given greater regulatory powers in case of urban cooperative bank. Accordingly, the following changes have come into force. The RBI can issue directions relating to the management of urban cooperative banks, including approval for appointment of chairman or MD or CEO, रिमूवल एंड रिक्रूटमेंट ऑफ। अब क्या था, पॉलिटिशियंस के हाथ में कुछ भी नहीं था। जैसे कि जो डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोऑपरेटिव स्टेट कोऑपरेटिव बैंक होती थी, उसमें क्या हर चीज़ पॉलिटिसाइज होती थी, क्योंकि वो उसके कंट्रोल में थी, क्योंकि डुअल कंट्रोल होता था ना, आरबीआई का होता था और स्टेट गवर्नमेंट के एक्ट का होता था। लेकिन बाद में क्या हुआ, फिर आरबीआई का जो एक्ट था 1949 का बैंकिंग का, तो उसमें अमेंडमेंट किया गवर्नमेंट ने। अमेंडमेंट करके अब क्या फ़ायदा हुआ कि अब जो बड़े लेवल पे जितने रिक्रूटमेंट होंगे वो सब आरबीआई करेगी, कोई भी पॉलिटिशियन नहीं करा, वहाँ की स्टेट गवर्नमेंट डिसाइड नहीं करेगी, ठीक है। तो ये फ़ायदा हो गया। दूसरा फ़ायदा क्या हुआ, बोर्ड ऑफ दीज बैंक्स शुड हैव नॉट लेस देन 51% मेंबर्स हैविंग स्पेशल नॉलेज प्रैक्टिकल एक्सपीरियंस इन स्पेसिफाइड एरियाज। ये भी अच्छा हो गया, इससे भी कोई कहते हैं वो नहीं, किससे आ जाते हैं, रिकमेंडेशन से। तो अब किसी भी की रिकमेंडेशन नहीं चलेगी। द स्टेटरी रेस्ट्रिक्शंस ऑन ग्रांट ऑफ डायरेक्ट related loans has been widened and common dictatorship across bank prohibited। स्टेटरी रिस्ट्रिक्शन ऑन ग्रांट ऑफ डायरेक्ट लोन वो भी प्रोविडेड हो गया। द आरबीआई हैज़ बीन वेस्टेड विद पावर ऑफ अप्रूवल ऑफ द अपॉइंटमेंट और रिमूवल ऑफ स्टेटरी ऑडिटर ऑफ अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स। आरबीआई टू स्पेसिफाई द गाइडलाइंस फॉर raising capital by urban cooperative by issuing equity preference special share डिवेंचर एंड बॉन्ड्स। अब इसके थ्रू उसकी इक्विटी बढ़ेगी, कैपिटल बढ़ेगी उसकी, क्योंकि issuing equity preferences special shares debentures and bonds। RBI can supersede the boards of director of urban cooperative bank in case of urban cooperative bank having operations confined to single state to be carried out in consultation with the concerned state government। The RBI to sanction voluntary or compulsory amalgamation and to prepare a scheme for reconstruction of UCBs with the approval of central government। ये भी अच्छा हो गया। बाइंडिंग अप of a UCB by High Court at the instance of RBI. Priority sector lending टारगेट फॉर यूसीबी मैंने पहले पढ़ा है, इससे पहले पढ़ा चुका हूँ प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर लेंडिंग क्या क्या होते हैं, तो आपको यहाँ समझाने की जरूरत नहीं है। आप अगर और समझना चाहते हैं तो आप मेरी पिछली वीडियो में जाके देख सकते हैं। टारगेट फॉर यूसीबीज इंक्रीज टू 75% फ्रॉम cooperative banks declared eligible lending institution under the interest assignment scheme MSME. Now let's move on the financial sector reforms. वो हो गया। अब इससे क्या क्या, इससे ये गाइडलाइंस चेंज हुए तो इससे क्या फ़ायदा होगा, रेगुलेटरी चेंजेस हुए तो इससे यूसीबीज को बहुत फ़ायदा होगा। ठीक है, अब बात कर लेते हैं फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर रिफॉर्म्स की। Financial sector reforms. The process of economic reforms initiated in the 1991 has redefined the role of government in the economy. In future, the economy will be dependent on greater private participation for its development. Right, such a changed view to development required an overhauling in the investment structure of the economy. Now, the private sector was going to demand high investable capital out of the financial system. ठीक है, thus an emergent need was felt to restructure the whole financial system of India. The 3 decades after nationalization had been phenomenal expansion in the geographical coverage and financial spread of banking system in country, as certain weaknesses were found to have developed in the system during the late 1980s. It was felt that these had to be addressed to enable the financial system to play its role, ushering in a more efficient and competitive economy. Accordingly, the High Level Committee on Financial System was set up on 14 August 1991 to examine all the aspects relating to structure, organization, function, and procedure of the financial system. Based on its recommendation, comprehensive reform of banking system was introduced in fiscal year 1992 to 1993. Committee on Financial System based its recommendation on certain assumptions which are fundamental to the banking industry, and the suggestion of the committee became logical in light of these assumptions. There was no second options about it. The assumption says that the resources of bank come from general public and are held by the banks in trust, that they are to deployed for maximum benefit of the depositors. This assumption automatically implied: 1. That even the government had no business to endanger the solvency, health, and efficiency of the nationalized bank under the pretext of using banks' resources. Economic planning, social banking, and poverty alleviation. Besides, the government had to right to get hold of funds of the bank at low interest rates and use them for financing its consumption expenditures, that is revenue and fiscal deficit, and thus defraud the depositors. The recommendations of the Committee on Financial Services, Narsimham Committee first, were aimed at जो पहली नरसिम्हम कमेटी थी फाइनेंशियल रिफॉर्म्स को लेके, तो कमेटी ऑन फाइनेंशियल कमेटी ऑन फाइनेंशियल सिस्टम, तो उसकी जो पहली कमेटी थी नरसिम्हम कमेटी, उसका क्या रिकमेंडेशन थे? इंश्योरिंग अ डिग्री ऑफ ऑपरेशनल फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी, इंटरनल ऑटोनॉमी फॉर पीएसबी समझ रहे हो ना, पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक इन देयर डिसीजन मेकिंग प्रोसेस, ग्रेटर डिग्री ऑफ professionalism in banking operation. Recommendation of Committee on Financial Services System. Recommendation could be summed up under the following 5 subtitles. On directed investment, the RBI was advised not to use the cash reserve ratio as a principal instrument of monetary and credit control, and in place it should rely on OMO increasingly. OMO have been studied in the last chapter, and I have been studying you, and you, if you can learn more about the OMO, and then you can go and watch my previous videos of organized money market. and this is the instrument of organized money market. Okay, two proposals were advised regarding the CRR. CRR should be progressively reduced from present high level of 15% to 3 to 5%. RBI should pay interest on the CRR of banks above the basic minimum at a rate of interest equal to the level of banks 1 year deposits. Concerning statutory liquidity ratio, it was advised to cut it the minimum level, that is 25%, from the present high level 38.5%. In the next years, it was cut down to 25% in October 1997. The government was also suggested to progressively move toward market-based borrowing program so that banks receive economic benefit on their SLR investment. These suggestions were directed to the goal of making more fund available to the banks, converting ideal cash for use and cutting down interest rate banks charges on their loans. On directed credit program under this subtitle, the suggestion revolved around the compulsion of PSL by the banks. Directed credit program should be phased out gradually as per the as per the Committee Agriculture and Industry and SSIS had already grown to mature stage and they did not require any special support. 2 decades of interest subsidy were enough. Directed credit should not be a regular program. It should be case of extraordinary support to certain peak sections. Concept of PSL should be redefined to induce only the weakest sections of the rural communities such as marginal farmer, rural artisan, village cottage industry, etc. The redefined PSL yani primary sector lending should have 10% fixed the aggregate bank credit. Composition of the primary sector lending should be reviewed after every 3 years. On the structure of interest rate, the major recommendation on the structure of the interest rate to be broadly determined by the market forces. All controls of interest rate on deposits and lending to be withdrawn. Concessional rate of interest for primary sector lending of small charges to be phased out and subsidized on the IRDP loans to be withdrawn. Bank rate to be anchor rate and all other interest rate to be closely linked to it. The RBI to be sole authority to simplify the structure of the interest rate. On the structural reorganization of the bank. For the structural reorganization of the bank, substantial reduction in number of the PSBs through merger and acquisition. Dual control of RBI and banking division. The Ministry of Finance should go immediately and the RBI to be made the primary agency for the regulation of the banking system. Public sector banks to be made free and autonomous. RBI to examine all the guidelines and direction issued by the banking system. PSBs to opt for radical changes in the work technology and culture so as to become a competitive internally. Finally, the appointment of the Chief Executive Officer (CMD) of the bank was suggested not to be on political consideration, but on the professional and integrity. An independent panel of experts was suggested. Asset Risk Construction Company Fund to tackle the menace of high non-performing assets NPA of the bank financial institution, and committee suggested setting up a asset risk construction companies or fund taking cues for the US experience. The committee directly blamed the Government of India and Ministry of Finance for the sad state of affairs of the PSBs. These banks were used and abused by the Government of India. Officially, the bank employees and the trade unions, trade aids and recommendations were revolutionary in many respect and were opposed by bank unions. There were some other major suggestions for the committee made it possible to carry out the following by the government. Opening of new private sector banks permitted in 1993. Prudential norms relating to income reorganization, asset classification and provisioning by banking. Introduction of capital education norm. Simplification in the banking regulation by a Board of Financial Supervision 1994. ठीक है, बैंकिंग सेक्टर रिफॉर्म्स. अब जो सेकेंड कमेटी आई थी बैंकिंग सेक्टर रिफॉर्म की, उसके बारे में हम लोग कल पढ़ेंगे. आज के लिए इतना ही. बने रहिए हमारे साथ, और हमारा वीडियो पसंद आया हो थोड़ा सा भी तो प्लीज़ चैनल को लाइक करिए, शेयर करिए, सब्सक्राइब करिए. थैंक यू.